You've seen record corporate profits over the last decade on Wall Street. CEO pay has gone up 600, 700%. The top 1% of the country has doubled its share of our national income. Doubled it. Even as ordinary workers, their wages have flatlined. When you adjust for inflation, most people here have not been getting a raise. You might think it's a raise, but it's not really a raise. And when you combine it with the fact that you're paying more in terms of premiums on your health care or co-payments on your health care, it all gets eaten up. Everybody knows that. You've experienced it. And so what we need to do is have a president who's experienced it too and remembers what that's like. I'll be honest with you, I'm doing pretty well now because I wrote a book that a lot of people bought. But let me tell you, Michelle and I, we remember it wasn't that long ago. It was recent memory where we're trying to figure out at the end of the month, how are we going to make all these bills work? And how are we going to make sure that we're saving for, Sasha and Malia's college education? And it's tough, and unions can help, but you've got to have a president who's on their side. One other thing that can help is changing our tax code to be a little more fair and a little more balanced. Now keep in mind, when I talk like this, I don't resent rich people. I think most people want to be rich. And a lot of rich people have worked hard to get what they have, and that's part of the American dream, entrepreneurship. But we've got to have a tax code that's fair. I've got a friend in Omaha, you may have heard of him, his name is Warren Buffett. And he points out that he pays a lower tax rate than his secretary because most of his income is in capital gains that's taxed at 15%. Dividends or capital gains are taxed at 15%. Meanwhile, the secretary is paying 21, 23, 28% in taxable income. That's just not fair. So what I proposed is we need to give tax rates to folks who really need relief, like your family. And we're going to create a credit that can offset payroll taxes for people who are middle class. We are going to make sure that senior citizens who are making $50,000 a year or less, that they don't have to pay taxes on their Social Security, which was something that was started back in 1993, but has put a hardship on a lot of seniors because their costs for heating their homes or their property taxes or other things have gone up. We need to give some relief to people who really need it like you. And in the meantime, I want you to know, and you tell your husband that I stand foursquare behind him and his efforts. In fact, I might stop by and pick one sometime. All right? Okay. All right.
What about all the union jobs that we've lost to Mexico and every other country that the large corporations have just packed up the boat, but yet they're still selling their product here in the United States?
Well, listen, as I said, I think that we're not going to be able to wall ourselves off of international competition. And we live in a global economy, so we can't just build a boat around America. We're going to have to trade with other countries. The question is, are we making sure that we're trading and creating policies that are fair for workers and not just companies? So, let me give you a couple of examples. I already mentioned our tax code gives tax breaks to our companies moving overseas. Now, we can't stop them from moving overseas, but we sure as heck can stop giving them tax breaks. That's something that Congress has control over. And we should save those tax breaks for companies that are invested in the United States. That's number one. Number two is we've got to have tougher negotiations on trade than we currently have. Because with China, for example, they devalue their currency. That makes their exports to the United States cheaper. It makes our exports to China more expensive. Now, we've talked about this for a long time, but the administration isn't willing to do anything about it. Partly, I've got to say, because a lot of those companies that are shipping from China used to be U.S. companies. Some of them are still U.S. corporations. They just moved their manufacturing operations over to China. They ship the goods back to here. And they have influence in Washington. So they say, no, don't change how the currency's working. Well, we've got to have a fair terms of trade. We have to have worker protections written into our trade laws, something that we still don't have. And we've got to make sure that any trade agreement we reach, that those countries aren't exploiting their workers, using child labor,
as soon as this is all finished up.
banning, organizing. That has to be part of any trade agreement that we initiate. But I also want to be honest about one last thing. We've got to create new jobs and new industry in the United States, because some of the jobs in manufacturing aren't going to be coming back. You know, because labor is just too cheap in some places. And so what we need to do is to look for where can we create new jobs and new opportunities. I'll give you one good example is in the energy sector. You know, every time you put up one of those windmills and these wind farms generate electricity, that's all steel. Steel workers are put to work when we develop alternative sources of energy, and you can't put the steel mill in China, or you can't put the windmill in China. You know, if we are serious about alternative energies, not just current ethanol, but expanding into cellulosic ethanol, using wood chips and all kinds of other stuff like that. Well, those are jobs that are created right here in Iowa. And also investing in our infrastructure. Those are jobs that can be important. We should be taking that $275 million that we're spending every single day in Iraq and using that to build broadband lines in rural communities and building new roads and bridges and repairing the ones that are broken and building schools that are wired for the internet so our kids can learn in a new digital age. Those are investments that not only pay off over the long term, but they also put people to work right now, right here and right now. And that's the kind of investment that we've got to make. All right. Young lady right here. Hold on, we got a mic on.
Nice to see you finally.
Nice to see you.
I missed you in Charleston when my tonsils out.
Oh,
so
no.
sad. I cried when I see you.
You did. But here we are together.
Here we are. So I was wondering, how are you going to make American agriculture viable here, where basically the same problem is outsourcing to other countries who use pesticides and chemicals on their food that we've banned here in the U.S. And how can we make this a good place for American farmers to work?
Well, there are a couple of things that we've got to do. Number one, we've got to have effective standards and labeling applied to our food imports. So, you know, a good example is meat. You know, I've been supportive of making sure that we label country of origin on meat, because if they don't have the same meat inspectors over there as we do over here, then that could create real problems. And I think that's true of all our agricultural produce. We've got to have a strong inspection system, and we have to have countries certified. We should have our inspectors make sure that the inspections over there are at least as good as here before they can ship in to the United States. That, I think, is a sensible, fair policy. Now, I also think that in terms of agriculture, one of the things that we need to do is to help family farmers expand their crops so that they can benefit from these growing markets. And one of the things that, you know, I think that we're going to have to do with this coming farm bill is stop sending all the subsidies to big agribusiness, capping some of those subsidies, taking some of those subsidies and making sure that they're going to the family farmer that really needs it and is struggling to get by. And, you know, fortunately, Tom Harkin, your Senator Tom Harkin is terrific on agricultural issues.